Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, worshippers of all ages, welcome to YouTube. My name is SeaRaptor, and it's time for another quarterly review here in World of Warships. This is an ongoing series of videos that I do literally once per quarter where we take a quick look back over the last 3 or 4 patches. We talk about the health of the game from a login, a population perspective, and just kind of gauge sort of how players are reacting in terms of how often are they logging in and what are the server populations looking like. When you put that alongside what has been coming out into the game. Okay, so I've got a few of these. I did these for each quarter of 2020, which of course was a bit of an oddball from a population perspective for a variety of global reasons. And we'll talk more about that as we get down to the population graphs. But for now, let's have a quick refresher of what was actually in the last few patches. I find very commonly, I have this problem myself. Gamers have very short memories. It's very hard for me to remember what was even in just the last couple of patches. So I like to do a quick review just to bring everybody up to the same level so we all know what we're talking about and we start looking at population numbers. So let's start. Back in January, we had the big 10.0 update. Of course, this was the long-anticipated release of the commander skill system. Now, I'm not going to... the revamped commander skill system. I'm not going to give you any editorial about whether this was good or bad. Everybody's going to have their own opinion. There was a lot of good out of this. There was a lot of bad out of this. And we're going to be dealing with the repercussions of the bad for a while. Wargaming has finally announced I think what amounts to their second round of changes. It should be coming soon. Maybe it's the first round of changes. First round of changes should be coming soon. I believe that was announced last Friday, what they intend to do with the Deadeye skill and some other skills that need a little bit of love and some tweaks. But there, in my opinion, guys, there's still a long way to go here. There's still some skills in here that you look at it and you go, but why? Right? Why do I have torpedo skills in a cruiser tree? Just to randomly pick an example. I feel like we can be doing a lot better. There were 2 rounds of clan brawls back in January, if that was your bag. I think it was one was tier 8, one was tier 10. I keep meaning to sit down and do one of these. I got to play in one season of Brawl, I want to say last year, late last summer. It seemed like I think it was tier 8. It was a tier 8 night. It was like a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, but I don't get to participate in these very often. This one I think kind of flew under the radar. The standardized secondary ranges applies to battleships, carriers, and cruisers. And the standardization is now done by tier. So like, if you're in a tier 8 battleship, everybody has a standardized secondary range, which is really different from where we were before. And it's one of the things that I really kind of ragged on the Italian battleships about back when I was doing first look videos. They had these pathetically short secondary ranges that made no sense. And now, literally 2 patches later, it was like, oh, yeah, we're just going to standardize everything. So I think this is actually one of the better changes. Now, again, there can be a separate conversation had about whether or not you feel like secondary builds, especially in battleships, are still worth it or not. I feel like there are absolutely battleships in the game that still benefit from a secondary build. But if nothing else, you no longer have to worry about what's that range of that guy's secondaries. It's all broken down by tier. And then, of course, the typical normal, we've been seeing this for quite some time now, little balance tweaks every patch. In 10.0, Atlanta got her range buffed. Flint did not, so rip Flint. Feel bad there. Still don't understand that change. It makes no sense to me. Tier 3 Italian cruiser Toronto got a reload buff. I mean, okay, sure, it's Tier 3. Oklahoma, Tier 5 Premium American Battleship Oklahoma got a reload buff. A much-needed reload buff, just FYI. Tier 7 Tech Tree British cruiser HMS Fiji got a deck armor buff. Still don't really understand why that happened. But then they did something to most patrol fighters in the game for virtually every carrier. There's a short list of premium carriers that didn't get this, but almost every Tech Tree carrier did, I believe. They all got their patrol fighter speed buffed, which is nice. When you play a carrier, when you play in a game with a carrier, you notice that the patrol fighters just don't seem all that reactive half the time. So that was kind of nice. Now, on the other end of that thing, the German carriers, this really was a nerf to all carriers, if we're honest, but it really impacted the German carriers the most. If you don't play aircraft carrier enough, you might not realize that German carrier fighters, like the little fighter drop consumables, had stupidly low detection ranges to the point where you could be detected by a German fighter plane that you could not see. As an opposing carrier, you could literally stumble into German fighters that you almost didn't know were there when you were flying around the map. That has thankfully been gone. It was incredibly irritating on both ends of that equation. Being spotted by a plane you can't see is so much fun, right? Ugh. Anyway, moving on. 10.1 came in February and bringing with Italian access, early access to the Italian battleship branch. This is kind of something that's been long anticipated, so that was nice to see. There was a new clan battle season coming in there. And of course, the new ranked battles mechanics kind of ramped up to 11 in this patch. Like the first, I call it the second season in quotes because the quote-unquote first season was like a test season. Obviously, they liked what they found, liked what they did, so they carried over most of the mechanics. They did increase the length and kind of reduce some of the rewards going into the second season to the point where there's a non-zero number of us like myself that just derp in the lower leagues and will not put up with the frustration of the higher leagues. There was a round of Clan Brawl back in February. This was a big one, guys. This was the patch. They warned us about this several months in advance, but this was the patch. They removed all of these ships from from availability, right? They're not available in game, whether that was, some of these were sold in the armory. So they're not available on the store anymore. Can't buy them for coal, can't buy them for whatever. So these are basically now reward ships, right? These are the kinds of ships that people will, for better or for worse, will chase come Christmas time in the crate system. Wargaming is kind of getting into a bit of a bad habit with sort of developing this artificial scarcity, right? There are some ships on this list that I feel like belong on this list. Thunderer, for example, needed to go. Alaska was very popular. That's because Alaska's very good. Småland is I understand why Småland is on this list, I think. She's a very powerful ship, but she's also not a ship that a lot of people really maximize. I'm in this category, right? I look at, there are elite destroyer players on the NA server that can absolutely do ridiculous things with the Småland that I can only dream about, and I feel like Småland is honestly not that bad. She's fine, right? She's got her benefits and her drawbacks, and she's okay. But Wargaming disagreeing and removing her from sale. Massachusetts, I feel like Massachusetts after the commander skill rework, there's no reason you can't continue to sell Massachusetts, right? Like that ship's not, I won't say she's garbage, but she is not nearly as ridiculously OP as she used to be. I feel like putting her on this list is a legacy to what she was and not what she is now. And the new German destroyer Split was added to the game for super testing, so 5-6 new destroyers coming down the line. Those were all going to testing. Now, 10.1 was really unique. I didn't realize this at the time. This was not something that I realized until I sat down to build these slides and do this video. There were no balance tweaks in 10.1. None. That hasn't happened in a long, long time. Normally, Wargaming's got a short list of little minor things they want to tweak. Now, here's my suspicion. Okay, this is my working theory, and I haven't asked this. I suppose I could have asked a dev. They would probably answer me over in the CC Discord or something. My suspicion is they've put a temporary hold on balance tweaks until the dust around the commander skill rework kind of starts to settle out a little bit, and then they'll reevaluate down the line. I feel like maybe the reality here is that they're waiting for the stats to normalize and everybody to kind of fall where they're going to fall with the new commander skill system before they start tweaking again. That's speculative. I might go ask somebody about that just to make sure that that's a correct assumption, but it would make sense. It's what I would do if I were sitting in their shoes. It doesn't make sense to have made a massive mechanical change to the way the game works and then continue to tweak balance literally weeks later. Moving on into March, 10.2 brought us the official release of the new Italian battleship branch, of course, except the Tier 10. This has become the standardized way of releasing ship lines now in World of Warships. We get early access for a patch, we get the official release for a patch, except for the top tier ship, and then the top tier ship drops later. They did this for Vermont and New American Battleship Split last fall. I'm not going to lie, guys, I don't like this. I think it's irritating. I feel like they're in such a rush to add new ships to the game, it feels like that you have to artificially drag out the release of a new branch. I like the early access for a patch, official release. They did that for a long time. I feel like that is the quote-unquote correct, right, whatever way to do it, just because it works. It works, and it's simple, and it's not confusing, right? You don't have to explain to people, well, yeah, you can start playing the line, and then eventually the tier 10 will enter the game, but it's not there yet. Like, ugh, give me a break. Now, the bonus is it does give them additional time to tweak and tune and test the top tier ship in the line to make sure that it doesn't release in some horribly broken, overpowered state or whatever. So that's a side benefit of this, but I still don't care for it. The Big Hunt event, I would say returned, kind of returned. It's a variant of last year's Key Battles thing that they ran last summer, last fall. There are some really neat exclusive rewards in here, some really cool camo skins and stuff. I'm not a huge fan of the mode, but there's certainly enough people out there that are enjoying it that they keep bringing it, that they're obviously brought it back. So, I mean, good on you. If you love this mode, hey, more power to you, and there's some really cool stuff you can earn by playing it. 10.2, the big change here, and it's kind of third on the list here for whatever reason, but they revamped the visuals of the entire game. Shells changed, splashes changed, lighting changed. The entire game just looks better. It looks sharper. There's more detail. When you look at a ship in port, the bilge pumps work. There's smoke coming out of the stacks. It's really impressive where they've gone with the visual effects. And of course, some armory updates. Summers is gone. Austin is here now. That's the steel ship. Marco Polo was added this particular patch. And then, of course, the big announcement is there's a bunch of more ships now on the naughty list. So you've got a few more months to obtain these ships. This is HMS Nelson, Tier 6 Premium German carrier Erich Lowenhardt, T-61, Haida Z-39, Asashio Lenin, and Graf Spee will all be going the way of the dodo sometime over the summer. Again, I look at this list and I don't understand some of these choices. That could be a whole separate video. Like T-61, I get that. Haida, I don't get that at all. That makes no sense to me. Asashio, no. Why? Asashio is so much fun, and she only really griefs battleships. Like when I want to grief battleships, I load Asashio. I just grab an Asashio. Like, we're gonna go hunt battleships to extinction. Like that's the fun of the ship. Why are you removing this? Some very odd choices coming out of the dev team these last few months, and I can't pretend that I understand it. And then again, like we talked about in 10.1, there were no balance tweaks. Again, guys, I feel like this is just a nod to the fact that everything's in flux after the commander skill change, and lots of stats moving around. They want to wait for the dust to settle before they start kind of wholesale jerking things around. So let's start talking about server populations, okay? This is our regular graph for NA. You see here our nice little steady trend line upward going all the way back, starting in third quarter 2015. That's all the way back here, all the way on the right where we are today. You can see our the last column's first quarter 2021. Now, 2020, you can see these last, the 2020 columns here was a pretty good year from a population perspective here on NA. Had lots of high points. Not really surprising when you lock everybody in their houses and tell them they can't go outside and, they're going to die if they get in their car and drive or fly an airplane or whatever. They all stay home and play video games. So you're going to see a lot of artificial demand in 2020, pretty much across all regions, all servers. We talked about this last year. And it's starting to back off now that we're getting into 2021. Vaccines are coming around. Travel is opening up. Global air travel is slowly returning. And historically, there is a dip between first and second quarter. Like you go all the way back to 2016, right? Here's 2016, dip. Here's first quarter 2017, dip. Like it's normal for the server population to drop off between the holidays and early on. And I was actually looking at first quarter and fourth quarter into first quarter. But bottom line is, as the weather starts to clear up a bit, gets warmer, sun comes out, we get out of winter, more and more people will start to go outside and pull away from video games a little bit. And you see that. Was looking at the wrong slides, but you do see, historically, we have seen that. 2018 is kind of the exception here because this was the one year that the Christmas and Snowflake event started very late. It started actually almost after Christmas. So this was a bit of a weird year. But anyway, NA population is still pretty healthy. We're still above kind of where we were from a regular daily logins, kind of pre-pandemic, right? You look at 2019, the back end of 2019 here. We're still above that. So there's nothing to really complain about here. The downward trend over several quarters is, I guess, a little worrisome, but also I feel like it's an acknowledgement of the fact that people are just starting to be done and get out of their houses again. I will point out that I feel like, and you're going to see this as we go, like most servers had a dip. I feel like some of it is when you go back and you look at those first three slides, it wasn't exactly that exciting in a quarter, right? Like, okay, the Italian battleship line came out and we revamped all the graphics and we redid the commander skill rework. But beyond those major release bits, there wasn't a whole lot to get really excited about in the first quarter of 2021 for World of Warships. So I honestly feel like some of what you're going to see when we look at these little population graphs, some of the dips and the changes you're going to see, are kind of acknowledgement of the player base going, well, you know, it's not that exciting right now. There's not a whole lot of super mega ultra exciting stuff going on. Let's move on. Let's look at EU. EU's been holding pretty steady here, right? You can kind of see. I should have moved this box out of the way, but you can see here the first quarter 21 number basically identical to the third quarter number. Obviously not as high as second quarter last year, but that's not surprising. Second quarter was the height of the lockdown world, and yeah. So I mean, EU's holding very steady. It's nice to see. Their trend line also on a nice, steady upward slope. They have also retained an increase in player base from pre-pandemic levels. You can see here, 2019, the second and third quarter 2019 numbers are bad on all servers because of the chaos around the carrier changes. Right? You'll see it's very evident the population of the game that there was a lot of mess going on and a lot of people stayed away while that got fixed or changed or addressed or whatever. So EU holding steady, looking good. Russia. Now, we've talked many times in this series of videos about the long downward slope on the Russian server, but they've done something here that they haven't managed to do for a while, and that is 3 quarters of kind of growth. It's slow growth, but it's steady, and I find that interesting. You have to go all the way back. Well, it's technically 2 quarters, I suppose. You see some of that here, late 2019 into the holidays. Again, you see it in 2018 again. So it seems to be a seasonal thing on Russia, right? Like they dip very low in the summers. Last summer being kind of, well, I gotta say last summer not even really being an exception. Even lockdown world and everything, they still had their little seasonal dip. I will say that normally you see an uptick kind of from third quarter to fourth quarter, and I think I mentioned this in the last quarter video. That was bigger than this, right? Ordinarily, I mean, you can go back and look historically. Here's our third quarter, fourth. Third quarter, this is kind of a modest one. Third quarter, fourth, that's decent. Here's a good one, third quarter to fourth quarter. Didn't really get a third quarter to fourth quarter bump last year. I'll be curious to see. Obviously, the trend line on Russia is bad. Of course, they started very high, had kind of high expectations. But I'll be very curious to see kind of how this goes in the future. Rest of 2021 should be very curious to keep an eye on. And then Asia. Now, we talked last year when I started this series about this ridiculous growth on the Asia server. Some of that, I think, again, attributable to lockdowns and global pandemic. They were able to sustain most of that through 2020. Big dip in fourth quarter. What I find really, really nice to see, a little bit of growth into early 2021. Probably some of that is holiday events and so on and so forth. But it's still noteworthy, in my opinion, that they were able to build an audience, some growth in the audience, and then retain some of it. So I'll be very curious to see as we go into second quarter if this trend line continues up. Again, historically, Asia doesn't really have the same patterns that everybody else does. They started strong way back when the game released and then kind of hit this doldrum level for a number of years. Little minor changes, 5,500 for literally kind of years was a typical average daily login. And then as the carrier changes came in, Asia responded very positively to the carrier update. And then, of course, in lockdown and pandemia land, all kinds of people checking out the game. And then as that's kind of eased a little bit, we're starting to see back to a little more normal population, but still ahead of where we were. So that's encouraging. It feels like the Asia server is on at least a nice steady uphill climb. Looking at everybody on the same graph, I like to put this one up just so you can kind of get a sense of where all the servers are against each other. EU basically remains the top dog in terms of normal logins. They typically have the most activity today. Russia has still managed to hold out ahead of NA, basically. For a time, NA was actually last, despite the strong showing that they had late last year. I mean, about this time last year. But Asia had jumped ahead, but Asia is now kind of fallen back down. They're sort of Asia and NA are kind of the tail end Charlies here in terms of daily logins. But it also helps, we looked at that long downward slope on the Russian server. You can kind of see, you put that graph next to everybody else, you're like, well, that doesn't look nearly as bad because the RU server tends to have, for a very long time, had roughly the same population, roughly the same daily logins as the EU server, right? It's only been in the last year or so that EU has taken a commanding, dominating lead in that department, and RU has kind of fallen back to where it's more typical, kind of more in line with Asia and everything. Now, one of the things other graphs that I build here, I build an overall health graph. This is everybody on one chart. So this is, if you take all 4 servers, you add them together, this is what the graph looks like. Now, for a long time, and you can see it here, this trend line has always been a nice, slow, steady, very gentle downward slope, probably no more than 2 or 3 degrees downward there, just over the long term of the game. And it would probably be worse if not for, again, pandemia land last year. The population numbers that came out of 2020, we had not seen since basically launch, which is kind of impressive when you get down to it. Global population, everything all in for, first quarter 21. Yeah, not looking too bad here. Again, holding steady. Basically everything just about sort of like it was in fourth quarter. That is, I will say, a little ahistorical. Normally we see an uptick. You generally see an uptick because you've got a lot of people logging in for finishing up snowflakes, doing holiday stuff, whatever. Historically, there's a pretty good spike in some of those. Well, I'd say that, but here's a downwards going from 2016 going down. So some of it, the timing of that holiday event does vary. But again, this is everybody, right? And Russia has that long, slow, steady decline from the highs of release. So what I like to do is I like to pull the Russia server out of the things and talk about the other 3 servers. Say, okay, if you take Russia away, what do things look like? And this is what they look like, right? So again, you have a nice, steady, solid upward trend line. You can see 2019, late 2018, early 2019 was kind of the low point. We've got what I consider to be a bit of an artificially inflated 2020. And we'll have to see how bad this recovery. I expect 2021 to be literally a recovery year in terms of game population. Recovery is not the word. Resetting? I'm not sure exactly what I'm trying to say. Probably recalibrating. There we go. That's the word I'm trying to go with. Recalibrating, right? Because we had a lot of people logging in last year, and I think now that as things are starting to get a little more back to normal, people are moving around. More and more people are just getting on with their lives. That some of these numbers are gonna kind of come back to earth a little bit, and we'll get a better sense of where things are gonna go in the long term. So yeah, there we go, guys. That's our quick look. One of the reasons I started doing this video, this type of video, is to kind of, people, dead game, people are leaving in droves and there's nobody playing. Well, the numbers don't bear that out, okay? I won't pretend that there's not things wrong with the game that are driving people away. There absolutely are. But, I mean, the notion that the servers are drying up and nobody's logging in is demonstrably false. This data is publicly available, and all I do is collate it into some graphs and put it on YouTube and talk about it for a little while so that everybody can have easy access to it without having to go dig it up. And I'll put the links down below if you really want to go check out. You can see the raw data yourself. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed that. I will see you on the high seas. Wash your hands. I'll catch you next time.